Graham, I want to say thank you for doing this and welcome. And this is exciting for me to be able to do this.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. So
I think it's going to be, it'll bring back a few memories for me as well, probably.
Right. So we're not here to bury you, and we're not here to honor you, but we want to get to know you.
Okay.
So we're going to go from the beginning.
You mean you don't know me after 40 years?
Maybe after 40 years, I know you a bit. But so we'll start in the beginning. So
Yes.
You were born May 31st, 1929, which means this coming spring you'll be 90 years old.
Right, yes.
Yes. So
And I feel you don't get old until you get to be 90. Whoa.
I like that attitude.
Yes.
So you were born in South Australia.
Right.
And tell me a little bit about your parents. I know a little bit.
All right. My mother was a nurse, and she trained in Adelaide.
In Australia.
Actually, in Australia, Adelaide's the capital of South Australia.
Uh-huh.
And actually, I didn't know this at the time, but later on we'll get to mention the fact that I worked for my PhD with Howard Florey.
Right.
Florey was an Australian.
I know that. Yeah.
And he was a medical student at Adelaide Hospital when Mother was a nurse there.
Huh. And your father was
We never made that connection.
Uh-huh.
But Mother trained in those days, before the 1900s, nursing was not really an honorable profession for a young woman.
Hmm.
I guess Florence Nightingale changed that a little bit.
Yeah.
But my grandfather disagreed with Mother's goal to become a nurse.
Hmm.
And he didn't like that, although he had called her Florence Nightingale Dickinson.
Oh, okay.
Her middle name was Nightingale.
Nice.
But he objected when she said she was going into nursing.
Huh.
And she did it anyway.
And your father was a farmer.
My father was born in London.
Uh-huh.
And he left school. I think he probably finished grade school.
Mm-hmm.
And he went as an errand boy in the local post office in London.
Okay.
And he worked up to become a telegrapher on the London Morse code
Okay.
on the transatlantic cable.
Huh.
And the war broke out. And I think he probably...
Now we're talking about the big war.
The war to end wars, yes.
The war to end wars.
Yes.
Yes.
And he joined the British Expeditionary Force in 1918.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, 1914. Yeah, 14 to 18. 1914. I think he was still 17.
Yeah.
But and he went with the British Expeditionary Force to France. And he fought through the first 3 years of the war through the trenches.
Yeah.
Through Mons, through Belgium, and at that stage they managed to hold the line,
Uh-huh.
and he was then in the trenches in France. He never spoke of that.
Yeah.
It was a terrible experience.
But I have in my mind that he was a farmer beekeeper. So how did he?
No, not before that.
Okay.
After the war, he came back. Oh, he got gassed a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
After the war, he went back to the post office. And as he put it, he realized in the post office that he would only get any kind of increase in his activities if he had to wait for dead men's shoes.
Yeah. Okay.
So he decided that he was leaving and going to Australia.
Okay.
He tried to convince his younger brother to do the same, but he stayed. So Dad came to Australia in 1920. The Australians wanted a few more people,
Right.
and so they recruited former British soldiers. And what they planned to do in Australia was to open up some more land in South Australia, in the outback.
Right.
And this land was semi-desert,
Right.
but it's by the river. And the River Murray comes, as you probably realize if you know your geography,
Not as well as you.
is the lies between, comes from the east, from the mountains in the east, and is between Victoria and New South Wales.
Okay.
And it comes into, runs west to South Australia, and then turns south and enters the ocean just below Adelaide. Well, the area that Dad worked at was called, well, the little township, small township, but they did have a hospital, was in at the top of the loop as it came south.
So was he given some land, or did he homestead?
He
or
had
how?
25 acres
25
of
acres.
land.
Of semi-desert land.
It was scrub desert.
Yeah.
But before you could do anything with the land, he had to put the irrigation in. He had to clear the land.
So then he meets your mother, he marries your mother.
Yeah, but he, first of all, he did all that. He lived in a little shack, and there were other guys there as well. They had to put the Hume pipe system in. At that stage, the river had been dammed up, and so they had put the irrigation system in. They had to clear their land and plant it, and build their house.
Yeah.
And he did all of that. Some of this was collaborative, but obviously he had to run a horse team to clear, get the stumps out and so on.
Yeah.
And he did that and planted 20 acres of vines, as well as a lot of fruit trees. And that's what I knew as a child. I was born, obviously, in 29. He'd been there 9 years.
Yeah.
My older brother is 2 years older than I am. Yes, he married in, I think they married in 1923. Mother was a nurse up in the local hospital. And it was a small hospital. I think there were 2 doctors
So
there.
it was your older brother and you, are they the only siblings?
I have one younger brother.
A younger
but,
brother.
Mother did not like, I remember the place. It was a small house that he had built. And of course there was no electricity. There was no water. We had a windmill and a well.
But your mother didn't like South Australia, is my understanding.
My mother loved Adelaide, but did not like the heat. 120 in the shade, but dry heat. We had half an inch of rain a year. Yeah, it kind of dry.
Yeah.
And whenever the wind blew from Central Australia, you had red dust. Of course, once you got the water in, and you to irrigate the fields, you got snakes as well.
Right.
They followed the water.
Yeah.
And there were flies. And those were the things that Mother didn't like.
So the decision is made to move to New
No,
Zealand.
before that, in 1932, they took a side trip to New Zealand. And I remember my brother and I went as well. They nearly lost Avery, my brother. over the side of the boat because we were out on the deck, and my father found him sitting on the rail, but we got him off. That's the only thing I remember about that visit. So they visited my mother's sister, my aunt, in New Zealand. And she had married a Yorkshire man and gone to New Zealand. And they found that New Zealand was gorgeous.
Yeah.
It was cool, relatively, green. It had rain.
Yeah.
Well, everybody has flies, but there were no snakes in New Zealand either.
Okay.
And Mother had a bad problem with a snake.
Yeah.
In her first pregnancy, she was sitting on the rocker. She was 8 months pregnant. All Australian snakes are poisonous. And on the rock on the porch, a black snake ran over her feet. And she aborted the next day.
Oh, sad.
So, no, she really didn't like snakes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So at the age of 8...
In 1936, we sold up and moved.
Okay.
And I remember vaguely the trip across to Sydney where we hit the boat. They packed up we had a little truck. And the furniture that we were to take was all piled in the back, and the two boys sat in the back of the truck on either side of the furniture.
Yeah.
And it was a 2-day trip, and we stopped on the way, stayed overnight at Wagga Wagga, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere like that, and got to Sydney, and then took a boat, and I don't remember anything about the boat.
So then your family resettles in New Zealand, and what is the living arrangements? What does your father and mother do?
That was a real problem. We stayed for a little while with my aunt, but then Dad had to look around. He thought about fruit growing. New Zealand did not have a system, a agricultural system that would. They didn't have a market for fruit.
Okay.
There was no international market. That was before they started selling kiwi fruit internationally and wines and so on.
Yes.
So Dad rented a place in Remuera, which is one of on Ranui Road. I don't know the number.
Okay.
And which was fully furnished, and we stayed there. Mother had the third baby, Murray. They dumped to the river. And she was toxemic at that stage. She was overweight and toxemic, and he was only 13.5 pounds. And I thought that maybe when he as he was growing up, I thought maybe he was, I was in medicine then, I thought maybe he was, had a pituitary problem and was overgrowing. But he ended up being 6'5".
Yeah. Well,
no, 6'6".
Jeffries.
But anyway, yes, Dad was looking after us on Ranui Road in this rented house, and Mother was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And she had the baby. Okay. Dad looked all around New Zealand. He traveled all over, looking at all the fruit growing. And nothing. Oh, they grow good apples down in the South Island, in the north of the South Island. Everything could grow good fruit.
Yeah. But
there was nothing. There was no market for it.
Okay.
And back in Australia, in Barmera, he had a fruit farm and grapes. And of course, if you want to fertilize the flowers, you need bees. So he kept a dozen hives.
Okay.
And so he learned all about beekeeping.
So that's what I have in my head, that he, in essence, was a beekeeper. He found out of Auckland, about 80 miles out of Auckland, on the Hauraki Plains. If you go east of Auckland, you know there's the Hauraki Gulf there. You probably remember that's where they ran the America's Cup. Okay. Well, the Iraqi Plains is due south of that, and it's about 60 miles wide, flat as a pancake, about anything between 1 and 3 feet above sea level.
So how much land did he have?
We got 5 acres.
5 acres.
5 acres, and of course now it was almost wartime. And those 5 acres consisted of the home, and he added to it. He built the home with a garden and an orchard around it.
So by this time you're going to the local district schools?
Oh, I was going to the Netherton Primary School.
And
2-room schoolhouse.
Okay.
All around us were dairy farms, 100-acre dairy farms. And this was, I had not realized at the time, but most of the dairy farmers there had come in. They were the beginning. They were the pioneers. Because this place had only been opened up in 1900.
Okay.
It was before that when Captain Cook came up the river. Right. It was all trees, and he mentioned the fact that there were trees that were 70 feet up to the first branch, 20 foot around, and so on.
But so now you're still surrounded by dairy farms here in.
They're all dairy farms. Yeah. They cleared the land. They got rid of all the trees, and well, there were a few spots of trees.
So did you enjoy school?
Yes, I enjoyed school. Grade school. It was kind of small. I would ride my bike. The school was Netherton Township. Was less than a 1-horse town. There was a cheese factory there, down the road. There was there was a hall. There was the school, and there were 2 houses down by the cheese factory.
Yeah. So what did you enjoy in school? Were there special subjects you liked? Everything? You must have done pretty well.
Well, I didn't do so well at school. I do have my when I left primary school, I do have my last report from the school.
Okay.
I was lousy in writing. I was pretty good in mathematics. Not very good, or medium, I guess, in reading. Good in reading.
Okay.
Because Dad became self-taught. And he had lots of books. And he got books from the library. So that was pretty good. I did reasonably well. Then we had a choice. There were 2 high schools. One in the middle of the plains, and that was a big school. That was Natia District High School. Natia actually, in Maori, represents the place on the river where they hung somebody from a tree.
Okay.
Anyway, that was a.
So you decided to go to that high school.
Yeah, so we chose to go there rather than to Pyroa, which was the main center, which was 10 miles the other side.
So how many students in your class in high school?
Well, the students, remember, the students were all farm kids. The boys all dropped out after a couple of years.
Okay.
2 or 3 years. They never got school certificate or university entrance. They were the exams.
Okay.
And the girls, how many in the first class? There were, I think, 12.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a picture. And the girls were divided into 2 groups. Those that were doing secretarial stuff, and they had to learn typing and shorthand.
Okay.
And the rest. So 1 room for each class. And if you got up to the seniors, they mixed up the 2.
the last 2 years.
It's a pretty small school.
There were 3 rooms in the school.
Yeah. So you mentioned the indigenous people of New Zealand. Was there interactions with the Maori people?
There were. When we took a bus from Netherton to Ngatea, we had to go through Karapahi and a few other. We went over the Piako River, upriver, and then came down to the school. It was only about an hour's drive. And yes, we picked up some Maoris at the flax mill.
Okay.
Flax mills.
And they were in your class?
No Maoris ever got into our class at that time. The Maoris were, there was the school included a primary school and the high school all together. So the high school total class, the total high school would be 3 rooms of kids.
Right.
And the girls, some of them went on to, some became secretaries, some got married to farm kids, and 1 or 2 went to teachers college.
Yeah.
Well, to go to teachers college, you only had to get your school certificate, which was, say, the equivalent of 10th or 11th grade, not 12th grade. Okay. So I was ended up the only one in my class
to go to university.
Yeah. I was the only one, and so I was stuck in the back of the class of the previous year, and there were probably 15 of them. And
but again, Maoris didn't participate in that education.
There were no more Maoris there.
Yeah. Okay.
The Maoris did not go to high school then, at least not from the plains.
Yeah. Okay.
And I ended up as I was the bottom of my class, but also, yes. But, you know, my first real mentor was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that mentor was the teacher of, he taught math and chemistry. Fortunately, at that time, the requirement for medical school, which up to that time had been Latin, was finished.
Yeah.
I did not have to learn Latin.
Yeah.
But I did learn French.
Yeah.
None of my French teacher, I don't think he'd ever spoken to a Frenchman.
Yeah. So the notion of going into medicine was that from you, your mother, or this mentor in high school?
When I was 12, I told my mother, my parents, that I was going to be a doctor.
And where do you think that came from?
I have no idea.
Did you have interactions with the family doctor?
We were relatively isolated.
Yeah.
I didn't have, I had one infectious disease. I got measles. And I remember the doctor came and visited, house visit.
Okay.
And he said, this is measles. And he shut me up in a room with all the blinds down because, you know, if you got measles, you got to watch out for your vision.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So not a lot of interactions with the medical profession.
No.
But somehow
my mother obviously wasn't nursing then.
Yeah.
So she was gardening.
Right.
She taught me how to garden.
Yeah.
She didn't have any daughters, so all the things that a daughter might do traditionally, I did. I learned how to cook.
Yeah.
I gardened, but when I got into high school, I started working with Dad, taking off honey.
Right.
And on a good day, on a good year, we had 500 hives. And you can't put 500 hives in one place. So Dad went around the farmers on a 10-mile radius and said, look, can I rent a corner of your field here? Yeah. And he would do it off, and he'd put 50 hives there.
But I knew this about your background, and I always thought your mother as a nurse, your father as a beekeeper, where you have to have close attention to detail, it's actually great training to go into medicine.
Well, medicine in those days, I remember Mother talking about the doctors in Australia, in Adelaide, down in up in Barmera. One she thought was terrible. I did apparently, as a little kid, have acute glomerulonephritis. And Dr. Sutton was terrible, according to Mother. He was incompetent.
Okay.
And he didn't diagnose it. Dr. Josky, the other doctor at the hospital, was very good. Pediatrician. Well, he wasn't a pediatrician. You didn't have any specialties then.
Yeah.
You did everything. They're all family doctors. Dr. Josky, he took my tonsils out. The only thing I remember about that was that I must be quite young because they put me in a crib, and I needed to pee, and I didn't know how to organize that. So that was a problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Dr. Josky was very good. He diagnosed it, and apparently I did well.
Good.
No problem since.
So
but
then,
anyway, they were the only doctors that, oh yes, I saw the one doctor that was in Pyro. Pyro was a town of probably maybe 10,000. And there was one doctor there. And I saw him because when I was, I probably was 13 or 14 then, Dad was in the wintertime, he had to take all of the beeswax and melt it down and make blocks.
Okay.
And send it off somewhere. I don't know what they did with it, but he obviously sent it to market. And so he had this big tank, about this big, and with a fire under it. And when it was empty, it was upside down on the, I remember where it was exactly, it was right in front of the Funny Honey house, and I jumped over it. And I hit my knee on the corner of it, and got a hole here.
Yeah.
And I went to Dr. Josk, to the local doctor, I don't know his name, and he said, oh, you know, you got a nasty thing there. I have to give you a tetanus shot.
Okay.
Well, the tetanus in those days was horse serum. There was no regular tetanus.
Yeah.
Horse serum. So I got a horse serum shot, and he immunized me against horses, of course. And that came later because I had another shot when I went skiing in Germany back in the 50s, and I fell through the ice cap. I was pretty klutzy in skiing, and got another thing here. And of course they had horses there, so I went to the local doctor and he looked at that and he said, well, I can't sew it up, but I'll clean it up for you and I'll give you another shot. I'll give you a shot. So he gave me some more horse serum, and I had a delayed anaphylaxis from that. Oh yes. But those are my only, oh no, one other. I had a few boils. Although they say washed skin doesn't boil. But anyway, I had a period of time when, in my youth, when I was having a lot of boils, and that came through from about 12 to 16. And so I went to the local doctor, and he took some culture from there, and I got a shot of whatever. He made a culture. He killed obviously the staph, and he injected it back.
Nice.
That's immunization against Staph aureus.
Yeah. Good.
Well, I don't think it made any damn bit of difference.
Yeah.
But
so let me ask you then: in high school, are there sports? You participating in sports, or are there no sports?
I was tall.
Yeah. Thin.
And skinny. I probably in high school only weighed, maybe 120. I was the skinny one.
Yeah.
My older brother was the fat one.
Okay.
Okay.
I had no ball control. I never made the cricket team. There are only two sports in New Zealand.
Okay.
Cricket and rugby.
And rugby, okay.
Yeah. I never made the cricket team.
Okay.
I don't think I ever hit. Oh yeah, we used to every lunchtime in the summertime there was a cricket pitch there, and we'd play cricket. But my role playing cricket, we would pick up cricket, and my role in that, I don't think I ever made a run. They always bowled me out before I got anywhere, and I never made the team.
So then you go to the University of Auckland.
Oh well, no, yeah. I did make the rugby team.
Okay.
The last year, and I think they needed a tall person in the lineouts to get the ball back. Okay. And they put me down as the last man down in the scrum, and of course we were a pretty small school.
Right.
And we were competing against some big schools.
Yeah.
And of course our scrum would get pushed everywhere. My job as the last man down behind the scrum was to collapse the scrum. Or I had to lie down behind it and everybody fell over me, you see. And that was my role. Okay. I don't think I ever ran with the ball or anything like that. I might have kicked the ball. So, no, I wasn't. I was a nerd.
Yeah, good.
And I did well in the exams. I think I was 63rd in New Zealand for school certificate. And I think I did even better for university entrance.
So then at what age do you go to the University of Auckland?
Well...
And how far away is that from your home?
Well, I must have gone to school early because I was 15 when I went to Auckland. The medical school, medicine in those days, you had to have, you could have 1 year in college to do the pre-medical sciences.
Right.
Okay? And if you did well, you could get admission to medical school.
Okay.
Okay? And medical school had 120 in the class. But remember now, we're talking the late 1940s.
Right.
The end of the war.
Yeah.
Half the people in my class of medical school were returned servicemen. Because they had a special for medicine.
So you go to the University of Auckland and then Otago Medical School.
I had 1 year at University of Auckland. I did very well. In fact, yes, I was #1 in my class there. In spite of the fact that there were a lot of students there who had stayed on an extra year in the big high schools in Auckland and had scholarship.
So you're roughly 15, 16 years old at this time.
I turned 16 in medical school.
Okay.
Okay. Now, remember, medicine in those days, we're talking the late 40s and the 50s. You might ask me, did I think about being a gastroenterologist? They didn't have any subspecialists. They had physicians, okay, who were mostly full-time, well, a few full-time, the Department of Medicine, a few full-time, and there were some part-time that practiced in the hospital. The first 2 years, it was medicine. If you included the year before, 1 year, if you didn't make it that first year to medical school, you could go on and do a Bachelor of Science and then get in.
Okay.
So that would put you 2 years later.
You did the 1 year and went to medical school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course I was the youngest in my class.
Yeah.
Medical school then was 2 years of basic science. And there were only 3 basic sciences: anatomy, physiology, and
biochemistry. No molecular genetics. They didn't know anything about it. Oh yeah, they knew.
No pharmacology.
No. Well, yeah. You learned a little pharmacology. You learned, no, it was therapeutics.
Yeah. But as a medical student, you had an experience with a facial cellulitis? And did you get exposed?
Oh no, that was when I was in Auckland.
Okay.
And I got a boil, a carbuncle on my face. I don't remember which side it was on now. This side, I think.
Yeah.
And it all swelled up and my eye closed. And I happened to be in a... I was still in class, and one of the junior professors, I guess he was, I don't know whether he was an instructor or an assistant professor in, we had to do, we had we had physics, chemistry, organic chemistry, a regular inorganic chemistry. We had a biology, wasn't called biology, but yeah, we had a biology course, and we had a course on plants as well.
But this teacher noticed something was wrong.
Yeah, he noticed that, and he said, you know, you've got to get treatment. And he called up his doctor and the local hospital in Auckland, and I was admitted, and I got penicillin.
Yeah, so this is 1952, 1953.
No, I didn't. No, it wasn't 52. It was 1940 something. This was at the beginning of medical school.
Okay.
This was at the university.
All right.
Yeah, my year at the university was in the 1940s.
Okay.
Okay. Because I graduated to medical school in 52.
Right. So penicillin worked?
Penicillin worked, and I don't know how many units it was, but it was 100 units or twice a day or something like that.
Okay.
And it worked like a charm.
Yeah.
And it was just before the exams, and I remember it was springtime, and I remember that I was sitting out as I was recuperating. I was then studying, because we had an exam coming up, I was studying the anatomy of the dogfish.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that clearly.
Yeah.
That was one of the things. And I don't know how long I was in hospital, maybe for 4 or 5 days, yeah. And then I went back to school.
And we'll get to that later, but the mass production of penicillin was enabled by Dr. Howard Florey.
Right.
From South Australia, and you worked in his laboratory at Oxford.
Yes.
Yes, so it all comes home.
So I had an early experience with Florey's penicillin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So then at Auckland, at Otago,
the medical school's in Otago now, which is in Dunedin. Only one medical school.
Okay.
Okay.
And where did you get into your sports career?
Oh, well, I was in high school, and track and field was not a sport there. But once a year, there was the grounds were mowed, and they put lanes in, and we had everybody was, families were, parents were there. It was a day at school, and they had races. Okay, it was the only running in high school.
Yeah.
And they did this every year, and they had jumping as well. And I found that one of my, who was 1 or 2 years ahead of me, he had been running. His father ran a cheese factory in one of the other little towns. Ray McKenzie. And Ray actually went to medical school, but he got to medical school a year after I did because he didn't make it in 1 year.
Okay.
And Ray said, you know, my brother was then, he dropped out of Natia District High School after a year. He didn't do very well. And my parents sent him to the technical school in Hamilton.
Okay.
And he was a big guy. In fact, Avery was the heavyweight boxing champion in the school for that year. But he also was interested in, he played football as well, rugby, and was good at that. Wasn't a very good student then, but he learned, as a technical school, he learned how to fix a car, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Well, Ray McKenzie was there. We were friends with the Mackenzies. My parents knew them somehow. I don't know how. But anyway, Ray said, "Oh, we were at the beach, one of the beaches up on the up on the coast from Coromandel Coast, and a nice beach. But they had Ray, the Mackenzies were there as well, and Ray said, "Oh, let's go out on the sand and do some jumping and some throwing." And he found Avery was throwing a big rock. He said, "Gee, you'd be good at shot putting."
Okay.
And I was doing, I don't know what I was doing. I couldn't run very fast either, but I was doing some jumping. So he said, "Why don't you come to the Pyroar every Wednesday night? I go and run." He was a sprinter.
Okay.
And he also became a jumper as well. "Why don't you come to the Pyroar, Wednesday evening Pyroar Athletic Club?"
Okay.
Which was track and field.
And they taught you how to jump.
They had kids, little kids running, and all ages.
Yeah.
And of course they had, and so we went. And I found that the only thing that I was any good at was jumping.
Okay. So then at Auckland University and medical school, you continued your track and field?
Yes. So I had a period of time, and actually, I was still in anatomy. It was the first year in anatomy. I guess it was the first year in medical school. Initially, I was doing the old scissors jump, and I was pretty good at that. My last year in high school, I think I could clear 5 feet or something.
Yeah.
Actually, I cleared 5'6".
Okay.
And that was pretty good.
Well, so, good enough to be.
I learned how to high jump.
But
and
you
self-taught myself how to do a Western roll, where you go over on your side, and then I taught myself because they had booklets, and you could open them up, and it would be a good athlete, and you would see from the sequence of events as you flipped over the booklet, and you could see how.
But you were New Zealand high jump champion.
Well, I broke the New Zealand junior record in the first year at medical school.
Okay. And then...
And it was 6 feet.
Okay.
Okay?
That's good.
And, all right, how did I train? Yes, I ran for, I jumped for the universities had twice a year they would have a inter-university sports day. It would be in Auckland or Christchurch or wherever. And I competed there in the high jump.
Right.
And I competed in the other jumps.
So in 1950 you make it to the British Empire Games.
Right.
And where was that held?
In Auckland.
In Auckland.
Yes.
How did you do?
Oh, I made it, not in the high jump, but in the triple jump. And I was 5th.
Okay.
I didn't have a coach. I had a jumping pit with sawdust on my front lawn. And that's how I trained.
Yeah.
But in the universities, I came up, I probably, if I'd had a coach that had taught me to run a little faster, I probably would have been up into the international. Well, I was international as far as the high jump.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, I used to run to keep fit. All right, the track that we trained on in Dunedin was 1.5 miles down by the straight down the hill from where we were. Yeah. And so I would run down, I would train, usually with running. I had a couple of friends in medical school, one who was a middle distance runner, and actually he did his he did his research study that he had to do for medicine on the problem of pain in runners, stitch.
Yeah.
And I was one of his. If I tried to run a mile, I would get the stitch pretty quickly.
So let's talk about medical school a little bit.
Yes.
What subjects did you enjoy? Well, who inspired you? What mentors?
I loved anatomy. It was 2 years. Dissecting twice a week. And Bill Adams was the chair, and Bill was an excellent lecturer. Bill would come and he lectured in osteology. He lectured in development. He would come in. You'd come in for a lecture, or he lectured in microscopic anatomy, and he appeared. There were 3 people in anatomy, 3 faculty members, but all of the potential surgeons had to do an extra year, were tested in anatomy in their pre-surgical exams. So they all became TAs in anatomy.
Okay.
So we had a lot of people in the dissection room. And we were in groups, of course, the same as, well, it used to be like that here, but no longer. One class, the first year, the first year of anatomy, you just did this. Second year was head and neck.
Okay,
and you had all the neurology as well. Well, Bill Adams would come in to lecture him. He'd call the roll, the girls first. There were 6 girls in our class.
Okay, out of a 120.
Yeah, he would call the roll, and nobody ever stayed away from anatomy.
Okay.
Because that was the roll call. And then he would start his lectures with the last paragraph of the previous lecture.
Okay.
And he had a fantastic ability to draw the development of the heart and so on on the board. And we had to know all of that.
Yeah.
I didn't, Bill Adams became the dean later on, but at that time the dean was a microbiologist. Okay. No, physiology. Jack Eccles was an Australian, and he was, this was his first academic appointment, I guess. He already had, he'd come from Oxford. He had been a Rhodes Scholar from Australia, contemporary of Florey's, a little later than Florey. So he knew Florey. He was from Melbourne, and he already had, he had just received a Nobel Prize.
Florey did?
Yes.
Yes.
No. Eccles.
Eccles.
And neurophysiology.
Oh.
And when I knew him, he would be doing research. He was doing research on intracellular recording from nerve cells in the spinal cord. The first.
Yeah.
But he had been trained in Oxford and Cambridge by the father of neuroscience. So he was still doing neuroscience research. I did well in both anatomy and physiology. Didn't do so well in biochemistry. Didn't like biochemistry.
Yeah.
But I was invited to stay on for another year after my 2 years of physiology to do a research project.
And you did that?
Yes.
So you graduate from medical school in 1952.
Yes.
You stay on for a year of research.
No, after 2 years.
Okay.
I did research in the middle.
Okay.
Before any clinical.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And I was given a lab, no technician, and I was given a project. You have, at that time, the electrical potential between a phrenic nerve and the diaphragm had been tested and done in frogs. Okay?
Okay.
And I was given the project, you will define the end plate potential in a rat.
Okay.
Okay? So I had to dissect the rat, keep it alive, and dissect out a strip of diaphragm, and of course the phrenic nerve, and put them in. Now the difference was you had to oxygenate it and keep it hot, warm, and you had to record it all, the end plate. Oh, you curized the specimen, okay, and so the diaphragm wouldn't be contracting. Then you would record the end plate potential, okay. So I did that, and I also was a TA for the labs, and gave a few lectures, talks to the to the BS students who were doing neuroscience. There were a few.
Yeah.
And so I got some teaching in, but I was only doing, and then I had to take an examination.
Okay.
And I did that and got another degree, a Bachelor of Medical Science.
So you graduate from medical school in 1952. And then you, the application to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar?
Oh, well, that was, I was interviewed the year before. I was a senior. I was in my fourth year, well, my fifth year in a way, in Dunedin.
Okay.
I'd done my clinical work. I was in my clinical period then.
Okay.
I had one more year of medical school, where you were farmed out for your sixth year around, it would have been my seventh year, counting, you could go to any of the main centers.
Okay.
But I was in the fifth year, and I think we had, for the fifth year, we had clinical medicine, and we had pathology. I love pathology. Oh, our chairman of pathology was Eric Darth, D,ATH. Appropriate for a pathologist, right? And he was also a forensic pathologist. And anyway, yeah, that was when I was interviewed. And I was interviewed locally.
Yeah, who gave you the notion to apply for a Rhodes Scholar?
Eccles.
Okay.
Eccles was one of my mentors.
So he said, Graham, you should look into doing
this. Yes.
Because he had done it.
Yes, yes. And of course I had been, all right, I was the top student in anatomy and in physiology and in internal medicine and something else.
But to be a Rhodes Scholar, there are several qualifications.
You had to also, oh yes, you had to be a fine, you had to be a good person.
Good person?
Yes, and you had to be involved
in something else.
Right. And
you had to be
for that
a
was
great
sports.
scholar.
Yes.
And yes, there was some kind of athletic.
Right.
It so happened that the 2 Rhodes Scholars for New Zealand that year, the first selection came from each of the universities. And if you were selected, I think there were 5 candidates in Dunedin. And the 2 who were selected for Dunedin were, we weren't exactly roommates. We were both had both lived at the Carrington at one of the student halls. It was Presbyterian, and he was in the room next to me. And it was they had one of the original large buildings was the women's. It was men and women, and they put in some old army huts, and we lived in the huts. Noisy.
Yeah.
But I was in one room, and my Rhodes Scholar applicant was in the next room.
So tell me about the day you find out you're going to be a Rhodes Scholar.
We then, each of the universities selected 2, and you then had to go to Wellington and to the Governor General's office, to the Governor General's building, and the Chief Justice of New Zealand, the Governor General, appointed by the Queen, and 2 or 3, or a couple of academics and a couple of former Rhodes Scholars were the selection committee. And each person, applicant from the university, was interviewed. And I remember nothing about what they asked me.
But that must have been hours.
Oh, yeah.
The interview must have been hours.
Yes.
And then were you selected that day?
Yes.
Oh, so you were told?
We were told that day, and I was told that day, and Hugh Templeton, also from Dunedin, was the other Rhodes Scholar for New Zealand.
So what did you do when you found out?
I then had to get on the overnight train up to Auckland to home.
And tell your parents?
Well, it was in the papers.
Okay.
They knew from the papers. Yes. So I took the train up to Hamilton and got on the little train that went every day from Hamilton to Paeroa, and they picked me up in Paeroa, and we celebrated. I don't know how we celebrated, but yeah, and I was in.
So they were excited, and they were.
Oh, they were excited.
And no hesitation on their part for their son.
No, but I still had another year.
Okay.
In Auckland.
You did your rotating internship?
So I had to do my 6th year, which was like a sub-internship, and we were farmed out because Dunedin had a small hospital, and they couldn't fit 120 students in there for clinical. And all the clinical we got in Dunedin was you were assigned a few patients. I remember 1 or 2 patients I saw, and they'd already been seen by 10 other people. And I remember one young man that I saw, I don't know how old he was, he had to be probably my age or just a little older, and he had aortic insufficiency, and he was going to die from it. Because of course there was no cardiac surgery.
Right.
But I remember seeing him and examining him, but I didn't enjoy clinical medicine because you were seeing patients who'd already been worked over by a whole bunch of other medical students. But when you got farmed out for the final year, you became a sub-internship. They gave you work to do.
So where did you go?
Well, I went to Auckland, but for the summer, I went to Hastings Hospital, which was a
on the east coast of New Zealand, and I was the only medical student there. And I was put on the medicine service. And that's when I saw my first patient with a GI problem.
Okay.
And he had ulcerative colitis.
Oh.
And he died from it. He should have been operated on. He developed severe ulcerative colitis, and he went into he became dilated.
It wasn't tuberculosis.
What?
It was not tuberculosis.
No, it was ulcerative colitis.
Okay, you're sure?
I remember him.
Yeah.
And I had to take a history. I admitted him, I did a history and physical, and he progressively, he developed a massive dilatation.
Yeah.
And he also had a bad social history as well. His wife had just divorced him. So the idea of this being there being psychological factors as well. But also, I helped. One of my...
You were delivering babies?
Well, yes. You see,
how many babies did you deliver?
We had to deliver 50 babies.
50?
While in medical school.
Okay.
That was our obstetrics. And they took us in groups of 10 at the maternity hospital. And we all stayed there. I don't know, I think we were there for, I don't know how long we were there for, but it seemed a long time. But that was where we slept there, we ate there, we did everything there, and there was a call schedule. If you were number 1 on the call schedule, you had to do a delivery. If you're number 2, you looked after the baby. But it came down, if you were the last person there on the list, you had to mop the floor, the blood off the floor afterwards. So I've got pictures, I delivered twins there. Wow. But, because there were so many of us there, to divide it up, you got 5 deliveries there. And you obviously, if you're 10 of you, you witnessed 5. Everybody, there were 10 of us in the delivery room.
Right.
And they were all nurses, okay? There were no doctors.
Yeah.
And these were all normal deliveries. We didn't see a cesarean section. But you had to make up the rest of the 50. And I did that in Hastings Hospital.
Okay.
So I delivered 45 patients with a nurse at the hospital.
And you were doing some minor surgery?
Well, no, that was at another time. That was later on when I was there. I didn't do I was assisting the surgeons, but I don't think there was an anesthesiologist there. Oh, there was a senior lecturer, a senior resident, who was also the assistant. Actually, his name was Ian Schneiderman, Bushy Schneiderman. He graduated a few years before me. So he was about 4 or 5 years ahead of me. And he was going into pediatrics, but he was there as the senior registrar, the one senior registrar, and he would assist with the surgeons, But somehow they did, we were taught anesthesia, dripping ether.
Yeah.
Okay, you put a mask on, you drip ether. And the patient coughs and, so if this was an abdominal surgery, a gallbladder, for example, they'd say, oh, okay, you can come and give the anesthetic. So I gave the anesthetics.
Yeah.
They didn't like, for gallbladder surgery where they had to get up under the diaphragm, they didn't like ether anesthesia. You've got to intubate the patient and we'll give an IV injection of whatever.
Fluorine or something.
What?
Yeah.
it was, you know, one of the IV. Yeah.
So then,
that was a problem. I had trouble with that. So they'd have to stop the surgery and come and help me with the intubation, because we're never taught to intubate.
Yeah.
So I remember some of that.
Yeah.
And yes, I was in the emergency room as well. I remember that was my first death was in the emergency room. A baby came in, and baby was alive then, but didn't last very long, and I don't know what the baby had.
Yeah. But so then you graduate from medical school.
I went to medical school.
Right,
I had to get dispensation from Oxford to come a term late. Of course, Oxford is on a different time schedule from Dunedin.
So you took the Concorde airplane from New Zealand to England?
Yeah, I went back to after the final year in Auckland. Oh, in Auckland you were broken up into all sorts. I worked with a plastic surgeon, Baldy Manchester. He was fabulous, and he had been through. You know, the surgeons were good because they'd all been through the war.
The war.
Yeah, the Second World War. Baldy Manchester. I had a time at the other hospital there, Churchill Hospital, and that hospital had an internist who, when he admitted a patient who'd had an MI, he believed that you got the patient up and walking as soon as possible. And that was totally against. I mean, if you have an MI in those days, you had to be flat in bed for umpteen until you got until you had a pulmonary embolus. But this guy, he was very good. And he seemed to do pretty well.
Yeah.
But so I had a period there. I had a period in the emergency room. The major memory I had in the when I was in the emergency room in Auckland, ones would come in. One guy came in and he'd been in a bar in a fight, and whoever he was fighting with had taken a bottle, broken it, and put it in his face. So he had a cut. It taken his
facial nerve out.
His artery as well, and I said, okay, your job is to sew it up. So yes, I sewed it up, and what I didn't know, it became a legal case, and so I was the witness that had to describe what the injury was in the court and what I did.
Yeah,
that was interesting. My first legal time.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we got to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So let's move. So how do you get from New Zealand to England?
Well, I had to go back down to Dunedin for my final exams. And I did that.
And then you jumped on a boat.
No, I jumped on a plane.
You did?
Yes, I jumped on a plane.
So this is 1953.
1953. 52 still, the end of 52. Before Christmas.
Okay.
Because I had Christmas on, I had December 52. It was in early December 52. And I left before I knew the results of the exams. I took a plane from Christchurch. I had to take a train to Christchurch, get on the Christchurch plane, and to Melbourne.
Okay.
And I caught an Orient Line boat that had come from Sydney in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But I met in Melbourne my relatives, Aunt Orissa and her husband, Bert, met me in Melbourne. I was there 2 or 3 days. I got on the boat,
It was an Orient Line boat, and I'm not. Oh, it was Otranto, and we went from Melbourne to Adelaide to Perth, around Australia, and then across the Indian Ocean to Colombo, Sri Lanka. Of course, it was
British at that time.
Yes, and we had a day there. We had a day in each place. So I met family, obviously in Adelaide, and I met family. My first cousin, Graham Chettlebarra, who became subsequently the leader of the Australian. He was a oceanographer protecting whales.
Okay.
And he'd spent a year down in Antarctica.
So now you're going around.
And then we had to go all the way across. Oh no, we went through the canal.
Oh, you went through the canal.
Went through the Suez Canal, but we went to. I stopped off. I stopped off in Aden. Had a day in Aden. But actually, it was in Colombo that I saw for the first time what the third world really was like.
Yeah.
But in Colombo, we did go. We stopped. We had lunch. A group of us had lunch at the local one of the very fancy hotels right on the shore, and they served us curry, and it was so damn hot that the sweat was dripping off our elbows.
Yeah.
We hadn't had anything like that.
Yeah.
Half the crew, half the folks on the boat took a cruise, took a drive. It was a whole day, you see, to a lake in the center of the island, and there was a little problem because the boat caught fire, and several of them were burnt.
No.
But anyway, I didn't go.
So the boat makes it to England and Southampton. Where did you land?
Yeah, we went to Southampton. No, we didn't go to Southampton. We went. We came into. But before we got there, we stopped off in. Of course, we came through the canal, so we had a day in the canal. That was interesting. But we also stopped off in Italy and in the south of France, and again in Gibraltar, and we ended up in the Thames on a foggy January day.
So you had money in your pocket when you went to visit these different places?
Not much.
Not much?
No, not much.
And then so you land in London?
Yeah, so we got to London, and I was met by my uncle and his family, and they took me home, and I stayed there for a week, and then I took the train up to Oxford.
So now we're in the 1953.
We're now in 1953.
Right. And you show up in Oxford and they tell you to do what?
Well, I showed up in college and they said, oh, well, sorry, we don't have a room for you in college, but we do have a room outside the college wall in the next building, and you will have a nice room there, and that was good. But if I wanted to get into college at night, I had to climb over the wall.
Okay.
But that was all right because I had the freedom because I was a senior. I had senior status as a PhD, a DPhil student.
Okay.
And but I did have in college I did have one of the college professors as I guess I had to meet with him at least once a term.
Yeah. So you're in the pathology school at Oxford?
Yes. The Dunn School of Pathology was down on South Parks Road. A lot of the basic science was there as well.
Okay.
With a park behind it. I could walk all the way around into the park and through along the river, a branch of the Thames, to work, or I could take a shortcut. But it was a good mile.
So then are you working in research? You're going to class?
I was given a project.
Okay, another project.
There were Florey after penicillin. He'd done the penicillin stuff.
So you're assigned to Dr. Howard Florey's lab.
Yeah, well, next to Howard Florey's office.
Okay.
Yes, the lab. And he decided, he was an applied physiologist. Okay, he was interested more. Actually, he was a gastrointestinal physiologist. He was very interested in mucus production. And he came and gave a talk at the AGA on mucus production. That was interesting. I met him much later there. But anyway, he had, that was, I think, his private, and he was interested in gastrointestinal hormones, particularly in pancreatic gland.
Yeah.
And one of my colleagues was doing work on that. But he is a pathologist. He wasn't a classical pathologist. He was a physiologist, really, but he was doing physiology of pathology.
Okay.
And he developed a program to look at atherosclerosis. And he thought, well, I need for this a pathologist, a biochemist, a hematologist, a blood clotter, and me.
Okay.
That was where I was assigned. There were already 3 people there.
Okay.
Okay? We were looking at, that had just been described, the lipemia that occurs during fat absorption disappears if you inject heparin. And it was called heparin clearing factor. And our job was to define what was this. Okay? So we were doing studies, human studies as well as animal studies. But we had to collect chyle. All right, I became very adept at operating on rats to cannulate the thoracic duct.
Yeah.
No, down the abdomen.
Okay.
Cannulate the thoracic duct, feed we put the rat in a cage, Bowman cage, and we fed the rat after the operation. A plastic tube in the thoracic duct was coming out the side, and we fed the rat fat, and we collected the chyle. Okay? And we used the chyle, added the chyle to serum, and it all cleared. And where did it go? It was hydrolyzed by lipoprotein lipase and bound to albumin. And so, that was the clearing.
Okay.
And that was what we defined, okay, for the first time.
So your Rhodes Scholarship is for how many years?
3 years.
3 years.
And I didn't have any, I had an examination. The one examination I had to prove, I had to show that I was fluent in another language. And I did take an examination in French.
Well,
I did French in high school.
Right.
I couldn't talk to a Frenchman, but I could read French.
Huh.
And when I was in high school, I just thought about that this morning. One summer in high school, I had a got a book written by Victor Hugo, Les Travailleurs de la Mer, Toilers of the Sea. And I had an English copy, and I translated it back into French.
Oh, nice. So
I
then
was pretty good at French.
In your spare time in Oxford, you're doing a little athletics.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, Oxford terms are rather short.
Uh-huh.
And you're really expected to, out of term, particularly summer term, to see England, and to see Europe.
Right.
Well, I got into athletics quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any high jumpers.
Okay.
And so, yes, I was invited to join the Oxford Athletic Club. And actually, the president of the club at that time was one of the middle distance runners. He subsequently ran in the 4-minute mile, was second. He trained with Bannister, and he was undergraduate at that time. Bannister had already gone to medical school.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, he invited me. And we went on trips. Actually, my first in the summer. This every year between the Olympics, an Oxford-Cambridge team comes to America and competes with, well, it used to be Yale, Cornell, Harvard, and Penn.
Right.
Okay, Harvard had dropped out, so it was Yale, Cornell, Army, and Penn. And so in 1953, summer of 53,
you come to Philadelphia.
I suddenly found out, yeah, we had a meeting in Philadelphia. But we traveled, we took a slow boat over, across, and I was on the team. I was the high jumper on the team. And I think there were 10 of us. And we went up and we stayed at Yale, and we came down and stayed at Penn in the Penn dorms, and we competed against them. Oh, we stopped by, we were amazed, we stopped by West Point, and they showed us all of the stuff that they had, for athletes and so on, mostly football, of course.
Yeah.
And we were pretty impressed. And of course, we were very impressed by all the training facilities everywhere, because we had an open-air track with no indoor facilities. We did have a coach. That coach was not very good, but we did get a subsequent coach who was fabulous.
So you become captain of the Oxford Athletic
Well, that
Club.
was not until my last year.
Yeah. But then you had an interaction with Roger Bannister.
We also had, in between years, those university Americans came over to Oxford,
right,
and competed against Oxford, Cambridge. But we always had, every year we had a competition between former Oxford, Cambridge athletes.
Uh-huh.
And in my last year, in the spring of 1955, we were competing against Oxford, Cambridge at the former students.
The alumni.
And Bannister was there.
Yeah. And so tell me about that day.
Chris Chataway was there.
Who?
Chris Chataway.
Yeah.
He subsequently broke Vladimir Kutz's world record in the 3,000 meters.
Yeah.
But
tell me about that day, because Roger Bannister planned to break the 4-minute mile that day.
Yes.
At Oxford.
Yes.
And you were there.
Well, I was running the meeting.
You were running because you were the captain.
I was the captain of the other team.
Yeah.
On my track.
Yeah. On this outdoor track.
Yeah, on our outdoor track, Cinder's track.
Yeah.
And our coach was Franz Stampfel, who was an Austrian. And Franz Stampfel also was training Bannister, Chataway, and what's the third one? Anyway, he also became the Olympic champion for the steeplechase the next year. Anyway, he was training them, so we knew they were running it. It was Stampfel that was the genius, was the mind that broke that record.
Right.
Yeah.
But you had a role in that race.
Well, I, as captain of the home team,
right.
I knew that they was going to break. They were attempting the 4-minute mile.
Right.
But if the track had been half an inch too short, it would not have been a valid record.
Right. So your job was?
My job, well, the day before, I got a surveyor's tape, steel tape, and measured the track.
And made sure it was a mile.
It was half a mile long, half an inch long. That was good. And I arranged for the various folks that were going to be timing and everything.
Right.
Oh, we had, all right. For most of our meetings, we always got. You saw the movie Chariots of Fire, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. The people that were depicted in the Chariots of Fire were our officials, because they'd come from Oxford and Cambridge.
Yeah.
Okay? So the starter was one of the Chariots of Fire folks.
So you saw that race. You were there.
Well, I was there. I was high jumping against them. Yes, as well.
Okay.
And Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. He nearly collapsed at the end, of course. And Chataway and Brasher came in second, and our guys were back there somewhere.
Yeah.
But you know, the remarkable thing was that the coach, he could take a good high school middle distance runner, somebody who's doing a 4:30 mile, and take him under 4 minutes.
Stampfel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bannister never gave him the credit.
Yeah.
Ooh. But, you know, Bannister and Chataway were typical upper class.
Right. It was the times, yeah.
Yeah. Felt that, you know, they were privileged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask that. So you're a New Zealander.
Yeah.
From Australia. You're put into Howard Florey's lab in Australia. And
they viewed me as a New Zealander, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But were you channeled into that lab because of where you came from?
I went to that lab because that was arranged. It was arranged by Eccles that I would work with Florey.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you're.
Oh, I met a few other people that are pretty well.
I want to ask about one person you met.
What?
I want to ask about one person you met.
Well, when I got there, yeah, I went upstairs to meet my mentor from college, who was responsible for me in college. And he lived in a new building. The new building was built in 1500. But it was open, and it was open upstairs. And I went upstairs, and I was waiting outside of his room. And this guy with a hat and a brown coat came up the stairs and had the next room. And he said, "Oh, you're waiting for what's his name?" I said, I don't remember his name now. But anyway, I said, yeah, well, he won't be in for a while. Why don't you come into my office here and stay warm? It was wintertime, of course. And I went into his office, and he had a little heater, and he had screens around his in his room, big room, and a little heater there.
Who was that?
It was the professor of poetry.
Oh.
I'm blocking on his name for a minute. 1 second. Well known. Oh, I had it a second ago.
Go like this.
Okay, never mind.
All right, let me ask you about another person you met. You met someone named Elizabeth Jones.
Oh!
That's who I'm interested in.
Elizabeth!
How are we doing?
Yeah.
You met Elizabeth Jones when and how?
Well, Elizabeth graduated from Smith College that summer. Okay? And she came over to Oxford for a postgraduate, for a summer school. Summer school in history and philosophy or something. Okay? Actually, she came, I stayed later, and I stayed and took a secondary side trip when I was in America. I went to the AAU meeting.
Okay.
GI, which was in Dayton, Ohio. Okay? And in Dayton, Ohio, I got on a Greyhound bus in Philadelphia and took it to Dayton, Ohio overnight.
Okay.
And I think I arrived with no sleep and rubber legs, but I was going to compete in the high jump.
Okay.
And so I went out and I got my things on, and I was out in the field by the high jump pit. And the people who were high jumping were the world record holder and the previous record holder and a bunch of other guys. Walt Davis broke the world record. He missed out on 7 feet. He only jumped 6 feet, 11 7/8.
Yeah.
These guys were still had their sweatsuits on where they're jumping when I dropped out.
Yeah.
But I got to meet them.
Yeah.
And I did get to meet the starter for that for all the sprints.
Yeah.
Was Jesse Owens.
Oh, Jesse Owens.
Yeah. So I met Jesse Owens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was great.
Yeah.
Those were the highlights of that meeting. But I did allow.
So how did you meet Elizabeth?
Well,
she was over there as a student.
I came back from America. She had come with the rest of the team back here.
Okay.
She met all of them.
Okay.
Except those of us who went off to the AAU meeting.
Okay.
And but anyway, she was staying in one of the women's colleges, so a lot of girls came from, mostly girls, who came for the summer school. They were going to do the European tour as well. Yeah. And the dean of the summer school was one of my athletic friends. He wasn't, he was involved in it, but he didn't do very much in athletics. But I knew him well.
So you met her at a social?
And I was standing in the summertime when a class is not, when the colleges farm you out. You go off to Europe or someplace like that. Well, I had to find another place. I had to go and stay with. They let their faculty out, their service people out. So I had to get digs somewhere. And actually I was staying with, for the summer, with the head porter who was out on the other side of Oxford.
Yeah.
And I was at the bus stop. And
the dean of the summer school, waiting at the bus stop, dean of the summer school came by and he saw me and he said, hey, we chatted. He said, you know, you've just come back from America. And on Friday night, it's rather tedious, but I have all of these American girls for a party at my home.
You didn't find that tedious at all, did you?
Well, I did, because I was very, very shy. Very shy. And he said, would you come? You've been to America. Would you come and help me? I need some more men.
Okay.
And so he invited me, and I said, you know, he put it that, oh, this is very tedious for you, but I would like you to come. And so I went there, and I saw this girl across the room.
Mm.
That was it.
That was it.
That was it.
So,
how long? We were engaged.
Yeah, quickly.
3 weeks later.
And then she goes back to America.
No. She went off. She did her European tour.
Okay.
After the summer school. Well, they toured up to Scotland. About 6 of them went together.
Yeah.
And she didn't write to me.
Hmm.
We weren't engaged yet.
Yeah.
We'd only met for 3 weeks or something.
Right, yeah.
And so I thought, well, that's the end of that. And she came home, and she left at college. College was just back in. She left at the hotel, at the Porter's Lodge, in my mail slot, a whole stack of envelopes. She had written every day.
Hmm. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, and I realized it.
Something was going on.
Something was happening. So I knew where she was staying, and I headed up there, and we revived interests and so on. And I think 2 weeks later we were engaged.
Hmm.
But there was a problem then.
Yes, you.
Oh, she did. Yeah. She had to go back to America.
That's the problem.
The Rhodes Scholar, Cecil Rhodes was had something about women.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I don't know what it was, but anyway, there were no women's Rhodes Scholars.
Yeah.
And you couldn't hold a scholarship and be married. Oh.
Yeah.
And the only folks that seem to have girlfriends around were the American guys who'd come from who were in the army, and of course they had second lieutenant pay,
Yeah.
as well as the scholarship. They were very rich.
Yeah.
And I knew a few of them. And yeah, they had girlfriends around. There were a couple of Australians who had a girlfriend with them as well. But anyway, Elizabeth, you couldn't get married.
Right.
Or you'd fall for the scholarship. Well, so Elizabeth was back in New York, and she got a job. She worked, I don't know, as a secretary somewhere in New York City. And we kept the overseas mail very busy.
Yeah.
We wrote each week.
Yeah.
We didn't phone call. No, I don't make the. I didn't make. I didn't. I was going out with one of these old phones on a party line. You didn't talk on the phone.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, I wrote every week, and the next summer, instead of going to Europe, I traveled around most of England. I went to America for the summer. Stayed with the family.
At this time, are you still at Oxford or you're in London at the Hammersmith?
No, I was still at Oxford.
Okay.
I was still. This is only my first year.
Okay.
And my second year at Oxford.
Okay.
In the summer, I came over to New York.
Yeah.
And spent that time with the family. Elizabeth was working, but I'd see her on weekends and so on, in the evening. And we traveled around a little bit, and that went well. And then I had to go back to Oxford. That was the worst part. We had to leave again. And anyway, the next year, so we were going to get married. We'd arranged it. I'll be through my research, and I'll have my thesis in by May. We'd arranged to get married in May in New York, mid-May, and I went and met with the secretary of the Rhodes Trust. He said, "Well, you can't do that. It's still in term. You'll forfeit your year of scholarship."
Oh.
So I had to make a phone call. It was the only time I called New York and say, "You're going to have to postpone the wedding." June 25th. Of course, the invitations had already been printed. But they hadn't been sent out. So that was all right. So May 25th.
1955.
1955.
Yeah.
Wedding. My family couldn't come.
Right.
From New Zealand. I arrived by the way, the previous summer I came on a boat on a French boat, and I caught German measles on the way. So I spent a week in bed in Pelham with German measles. And of course, that was all right because it was well known that if you were a young woman, you needed to have German measles before you ever got pregnant.
Okay.
So all of Elizabeth's friends came to visit me with German measles to get German measles because there was no immunization. So I was quite busy. Yeah.
So you get married in June of 55.
Yes.
And then you go back to England.
Yeah. I arrived 2 days before the wedding. And the day before the wedding, we had a luncheon, and we had obviously the dinner before wedding, and then we were married. And we went off for a honeymoon up to New Hampshire. And actually, we stayed at the home, at the summer home of Elizabeth's roommate from college in Jeffries, New Hampshire.
Where you now have a summer home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we stayed there, and then we visited a good friend of the family up in Vermont, and then we spent some time in Massachusetts on the out of Boston. And then we were back on the U.S. United States, SS United States, back to England.
So you're doing your last year of your Oxford scholarship.
No, I've done that.
You've done that, and now you go to
And now
Hammersmith.
I had a job.
Okay.
An internship.
A paying job.
A paid job.
Yes.
Yes. I think we got, I don't remember how much we got. I think it was something like £500
a year. This is in London.
No, Oxford.
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 Okay.
And I had a choice. I'd applied,
and I had internship in England had to be 6 months of medicine, 6 months of surgery. Mm-hmm. Well, apparently all of the physicians and surgeons and people that are working in Oxford at the United Oxford hospitals sit around and they decide who gets what.
Yeah. And
a lot of it is by hearsay, oh, I know, somebody told me this guy's good. Mm-hmm. So mostly the folks there, oh yeah, some of the Oxford folks had come from other places, but they were mostly students from there. Some were Australians. Okay, I got a general surgeon who was awful, terrible. And for 6 months, surgery.
Right.
I did general surgery for 6 months. Okay, that was 2 days of operating, and their operating lists would be 3 subtotal gastrectomies, a couple of gallbladders, and maybe some hernias. And all right, if you happen to be available, you've got some. They were all planned, and you might get an emergency for an appendix or something. Yeah. And you had a surgical registrar as well. Fortunately, I had 2 surgical registrars who were fabulous. Mm-hmm. One, they were waiting. They'd been registrars for a while, waiting for attending positions.
Right.
And one actually became the chair of surgery at medical school in Kenya.
Oh.
But he went up to Scotland first, and later on he became chair of medicine.
So that's 1955 to 1957. Then 1957 you go to London and you're working at the Hammersmith.
Yes.
And you're working with a famous liver doctor.
Yes, but you see, I was working in Oxford. There weren't any gastroenterologists in those days.
Right.
Sheila Sherlock was a liver doctor, but she was a general physician. And she admitted to hospital a lot of general medical stuff as well as the liver stuff.
Okay.
The liver stuff was referred to her. Mm-hmm. But she, but you see, in Oxford, I also worked the second year in Oxford. I had a year in pediatrics instead of medicine. Mm-hmm. That was fabulous. Victoria Smallpiece, one of my mentors. Mm-hmm. Victoria Smallpiece. After all, with that name, you can imagine how big she was. She was 6'3", and she was wonderful.
Good.
Yeah, there were two pediatricians at the Oxford Hospital. She was one. She was the senior, and I worked with her for 6 months, and I loved pediatrics, but I did not like the oncology, because all those little kids who got lymphoma died.
Yeah.
But we had at the Churchill Hospital up there, we did have a lot of children who had bronchiectasis from their previous exposure to whooping cough and so on. And what we'd do is we would try to clean them out with antibiotics and postural drainage, etc., etc., etc. And they would have a selective, they would get bronchograms, and they would have selective surgery, chest surgery.
Yeah.
And the next year, I had for attendings Dr. Cook, who was very big, very good. But I also looked after the wards up at the Churchill Hospital, where they did the first
double-blind study of steroids in ulcerative colitis. And that was Sidney Truelove and his chief, who was the chair of, I guess, of medicine. But Truelove and Witz had made his, did a lot of stuff with iron deficiency anemia and so on. But Truelove was the person who was, and we had half a ward and side rooms full of patients with severe ulcerative colitis on double-blind corticosteroids.
And it worked?
And it was as sick as hell. Yeah, it worked.
Yeah.
And of course, Truelove brought, that's the first double-blind trial in GI. But we also had patients with, one of the attendings also had a little bit of GI. I had a patient, I always remember a patient, well, I remember several patients with ulcer disease that they got operated on, but I had a patient who was, who had intractable ulcer pain. I'm sure that guy had a ZE. You couldn't help his pain. Of course, we didn't have it. We had anticholinergics, antacids. We dripped him with milk and antacids.
Sippy diet.
What?
The sippy diet.
Sippy diet, yeah. Oh, through tube.
Yeah.
And he was operated on. And he perforated post-op and died.
What is Elizabeth doing?
Oh, she got a secretarial job with Witz. She worked with Witz.
So why the decision then to move to London? I suspect Elizabeth was anxious to get home.
No. I had done the 2 years at Oxford.
Right.
One peds and surgery,
right,
and one medicine. And after that, I sat the board exams. The examinations for the Royal College of Physicians. And I passed.
Good.
So I have my board exam.
Okay.
And why did we move to London? I don't know. They didn't say. I don't think they had anything for us at Oxford. There were no
positions.
Registrar positions. Okay, and so several of my friends had gone off to there as well. So yes, I applied for Hammersmith, it's the Royal Postgraduate Medical School.
Right.
For postgraduate, yes. And there weren't any medical students there, but they were taking senior house officers. Okay? And again, it's a lottery. You apply for 6 months, and they assign you to somebody. Okay? And there, obviously, the Hammersmith folks, there was a very, very good hematologist there. There was a very good endocrinologist, a good urologist, a good renal person. These were top people, and Sheila Sherlock on neurology, so on. Famous names, people who were writing the textbooks. And I ended up with Sheila Sherlock.
Right.
Yeah. And that was my first, well, that's my second view of gastroenterology. I didn't know it. There were no other, oh yes, there was one other London physician who did mostly gastroenterology, and I forget his name. He was in another hospital.
So I remember meeting Dame Sheila Sherlock.
She became Dame Sheila Sherlock. She got into her position because all of the men were in the army. Okay?
And you're 6'5", and Dr. Sherlock is how tall?
Oh, not very tall, but in the average height. And her husband was a pulmonologist.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sort of tagging along.
Yeah. And you worked with her for a year?
Well, I worked with her from, I had a 6-month appointment that she kept me on afterwards because then I got a message. I got a letter from Her Majesty.
Okay.
You were no longer a student.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And therefore you are eligible.
You were now, as of July 1st, or June, I don't know, June or July. This was in May.
Mm-hmm.
You will either leave the country or you will sign up for 2 years in the Army.
Yeah. And this was a hot time to be in the
what
Army.
did I do? I quickly, I talked to Sheila about this, and I said, well, we're leaving. And so she paid me until we left.
Hmm.
And I sort of had I still had I don't know whether I was official, but I was still seeing patients with her and still working with her, but I was doing a little bit of research. It wasn't much. Anyway,
so then you had to really scramble.
And I wrote to, when we had come to New York, when I'd come, before we married, friends of the Joneses, they all lived in Pelham.
Mm-hmm. New York, outside New York City.
Yeah, and I met a senior resident who was a PNS.
Columbia.
And he introduced, I visited for a day up there, and he took me and I met Loeb, the chief of medicine.
Yeah.
And I went to, Tom Almy lived 1 block away in Pelham. I didn't meet Tom, but but the hematologist at Cornell, chief of hematology, I met lived down the road, and so he brought me to Cornell. So I visited the Cornell hospitals in Bellevue.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but I also applied to Cook County Hospital. I also applied to one of Sheila Callender, the hematologist at Oxford, had done work with the chief of medicine out in Washington U.
Okay, St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis.
So you were applying all over because the alternative.
Yeah, I needed something.
The alternative was the British Army.
Yes.
And you would have been sent where?
Suez
Canal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just hold on a second. We are. What time is it?
We're 2 hours in. If you want to get a break, we can get a break now.
Yeah. So the question is, we have 60 more years to go.
Yes.
And
I'm thinking about 2 more hours.
Should we do it another time? You want to take a break? We've been at this for 2 hours.